There are places designed to leave no witnesses. Not because nothing happens there, but because everything does. A low stretch of land near the edge of a wide, patient river. Fields that look gentle from a distance. A house built to face the breeze. White paint catching the light, as if the sun itself approved of its position. Smaller buildings arranged behind it in practical lines, as though human lives could be organized the way tools are. In such places, memory is not encouraged. Records exist, but they are about yield, not childhood. Weather, not birthdays. Inventories, not mothers. A child enters this world the way weather does, noticed only if it interferes with work. He is born at night, though no one marks the hour. His mother is allowed to hold him briefly, but even that is not hers to decide. Before the first week of his life is finished, distance is placed between them. Not dramatic distance, not a journey. Just enough space to make attachment inconvenient. He will not grow up knowing her voice in daylight. This is not unusual. That is the point. The system does not rely on cruelty alone. Cruelty is loud. It draws attention. The system prefers procedure. Separation ensures efficiency. Confusion ensures obedience. If a child does not know where he belongs, he cannot imagine belonging anywhere else. He learns early that questions are dangerous not because they bring punishment, though they sometimes do, but because they reveal expectation. Expectation suggests a world that operates differently. That is the real threat. So he watches children who grow up inside control, learn the science of observation the way other children learn games. They read footsteps, measure, tone, memorize the weight of silence after a command. They know which doors open quickly and which require hesitation. They learn that the loudest person in the yard is rarely the most powerful one. He does not yet understand the shape of the cage, but he knows its shadows. Dawn morning begins before light. A horn, a bell, a knock on wood. The sound changes depending on who is in charge, but the meaning does not. Movement must happen quickly enough to look automatic. Slowness is interpreted as attitude. Attitude is interpreted as risk. Food is fuel, not pleasure. Names are shortened, replaced, or ignored depending on convenience. Laughter exists, but it travels low to the ground, careful not to rise high enough to be mistaken for defiance. The child grows in this atmosphere, the way a plant grows under a rock, bending first, then learning the direction of pressure. He studies faces the way others study books. He is not allowed to touch. Books are present in this world, stacked on shelves in the large house, carried under arms, opened at tables. They contain laws, stories, numbers, maps. Entire universes bound in leather. He sees them the way a locked door might see a key pass by, close enough to understand their importance, too far to be used. He notices something else. The people who read move differently. Their steps contain assumption. Their voices carry expectation of being answered. Even their mistakes are treated as temporary. Knowledge, then, is not just information, it is posture. He files this away, without knowing he has done so. Time passes in units of labor, not years. Height is measured against tools. Strength is discussed in relation to output. Childhood fades, not with age, but with assignment. There are older people in the quarters whose eyes hold a distance that cannot be crossed. They remember places the child does not. Languages that surface only in fragments. Songs that change shape, depending on who might be listening. They speak carefully around the young, not because children cannot understand, but because they understand too quickly. Stories are told sideways. A tale about a fox that escapes a trap by pretending to be caught. A story of a bird that learns the farmer's schedule better than the farmer himself. Lessons disguised as folklore. Survival disguised as entertainment. The child listens, not because he is told to, but because stillness is the safest form of movement. In the main house, conversations drift through open windows during warm months. Words like investment, temperament, management, discussions about human beings conducted in the same tone used for soil. There is no shouting that would suggest uncertainty. Instead, there is confidence, a belief that the structure of the world is as natural as gravity, that some are born to decide and others to be decided for, that this arrangement is not only profitable, but proper. This belief is the true architecture. Wood rots, laws change, but belief can survive generations. The child senses it before he can name it, an invisible agreement upheld by people who have never needed to question it. He also senses its weakness, because anything that must be constantly explained is not as solid as it pretends. He hears justifications offered to visitors, long, careful sentences about order and care, about guidance and responsibility. The words are polished, rehearsed. They are not spoken for the benefit of those who live under them. They are spoken to reassure those who benefit from them. The child does not understand the language fully, but he understands performance. And performance, once recognized, cannot be unseen. He begins to notice gaps, moments when instructions contradict each other, when a rule bends for convenience, when punishment falls not on the guilty, but on the visible. These inconsistencies are small, but they accumulate like cracks in glass. A system that claims perfection cannot admit flexibility, so it hides it. He learns to live in those hidden spaces, to appear slower than he is, to speak less than he knows, to let others underestimate the range of his attention. Invisibility becomes less a condition and more a strategy, though he would not yet call it that. He is praised for obedience. This is useful. Obedience lowers scrutiny. Scrutiny is dangerous. The less he is noticed, the more he sees. He observes how instructions change when certain people are absent, how fear travels faster than orders, how rumors move along paths no overseer can map. Power, he realizes, is loud in posture, but quiet in function. It depends on habits repeated so often they feel like nature. Change, then, would not arrive like a storm. It would arrive like a question no one meant to ask. He does not yet know the shape of that question, but he feels its outline forming, not as rebellion, not as anger, but as curiosity sharpened by confinement. Why do some people read and others do not? Why do some families stay together while others dissolve at convenience? Why are certain words spoken softly, as if their volume alone could break something? The most dangerous thoughts are not shouted, they are noticed. And once noticed, they do not disappear. The child grows taller. His tasks grow heavier. His face settles into an expression that reveals little and records much. Those who oversee him see reliability, usefulness, a manageable future. They do not see the archive forming behind his eyes. They do not see that every command teaches him not only what to do, but how authority sounds when it is unsure of itself. They do not see that erasure, done imperfectly, leaves traces. And traces, if followed patiently, can lead out of places designed to hold everything in. For now, he remains where he was placed, unnamed in this telling, unremarkable in their records, present in every moment. The assumed does not matter. The river keeps moving beside the land, indifferent and constant. And somewhere within the quiet routines of a world built on forgetting, a mind is learning how memory works, not the kind written in books, but the kind that survives by hiding until the right moment to be spoken. That moment is not yet, so we leave him here, still small in the eyes of those who measure worth, already larger than the story they intend for him. A system does not announce itself. It does not gather everyone together and explain its design. It does not need to. By the time a person is old enough to ask questions, the answers have already been built into the walls, the paths, the distance between one body and another. The land teaches first. Fields divided with practical logic, not beauty. Fences placed where they are most efficient, not where they make sense to a child's sense of fairness. The large house positioned on the slight rise, as if elevation itself were evidence of superiority. From its windows, movement below can be observed without effort. Surveillance disguised as scenery. Below, the smaller cabins lean slightly, as if tired of holding themselves upright. That the boy, still unnamed here, grows inside this geography of instruction. He learns where he may walk without being asked where he is going. He learns which doors are entered through the front and which only from the back. He learns that space itself is a language, and he is expected to speak it without error. Mistakes are rarely explained. They are corrected. Correction can take many forms: a sharp word, a withheld portion, an assignment designed to exhaust rather than produce. Pain exists? Yes, but more often control arrives as adjustment. A tightening here, a subtraction there. A reminder that comfort is conditional. The people who enforce these rules do not all look alike. Some carry whips, some carry ledges, some carry nothing but a tone of voice that assumes compliance. Power wears many costumes, and the system benefits from this variety. It prevents resentment from finding a single face to attach itself to. The boy notices something else. Those with the least authority are often the most eager to display it. An overseer who was poor before he arrived. A driver given small privileges in exchange for managing others. A clerk who owns no land but holds a pen that decides rations. Each protects his narrow rung on the ladder by pressing down on those below. This is how the structure stabilizes itself, by distributing small portions of control downward, like crumbs that keep hunger from turning into revolt. Above them all are the owners, who speak of distance as if it were benevolence. They do not shout. They prefer policies, schedules, systems that run whether they are present or not. Their absence is presented as trust, but it is simply delegation with deniability. If something cruel happens, it was the overseer's temperament. If something profitable happens, it was the owner's wisdom. The boy does not know these words yet. Deniability, delegation. But he understands their effect. Responsibility flows downward. Credit flows up. He watches the daily choreography. Dawn. Bodies move in patterns older than their memories. Tools distributed. Assignments given. Children old enough to carry water but not yet strong enough to be counted as full labor drift between spaces, belonging nowhere completely. Women move with double burdens, field and cabin, production and repair. Their exhaustion is treated as reliability. Their endurance is expectation. Men are measured in output, but also in temperament. Too strong-willed, and they are watched. Too broken, and they are deemed waste. The ideal worker, the system quietly decides, is one who feels deeply but shows little. Emotion must be managed, not eliminated. Joy can exist in controlled amounts. A sun at dusk, a joke in the rose, because total despair slows the hands. But hope must remain abstract, unattached to any real possibility. So hope becomes spiritual, distant, postponed to another world. The present must remain practical. On certain days, a preacher is invited, not to question the structure, but to sanctify it. Passages are selected carefully, obedience emphasized, suffering framed as temporary, reward as future. The words settle over the crowd like a warm blanket that also restricts movement. The boy listens. He notices how scripture sounds different depending on who reads it. In the large house, It is about order. In the cabins, whispered at night, it becomes about deliverance. Same book, different emphasis. Meaning, he begins to understand, is shaped by position. He starts to collect these differences. Not physically. There's nowhere to keep such things. But internally, contradictions stored like seeds in dry ground. He is assigned new tasks as he grows. Errands to the main house, carrying messages, fetching items. These small responsibilities are considered signs of trust. In reality, they are efficiencies. A young person who moves quickly and draws little attention is a useful extension of the system's reach. Inside the large house, the air feels different. Cooler. Quieter. Time moves at a different speed. Meals happen at tables, not in pauses. Between labor, conversations stretch without fear of interruption by a horn or a command. And there are books. Shelves of them. Stacked knowledge, treated as decoration. He carries one once, instructed to move it from a table to a study. It is heavier than he expects. Not because of paper, because of what it represents. A world he is not meant to enter. He notices the children of the house, learning letters, tracing shapes with ink-stained fingers, complaining about lessons, treating education as burden, not privilege. The irony lodged quietly in him. Something others resist is the very thing denied to him. He does not yet form a plan. Planning suggests possibility. Possibility is dangerous to feel without evidence. Instead, he observes the mechanics of learning the way he observes everything else. How a page is turned, how a finger follows a line, how sounds attached to symbols dot knowledge, he realizes, is not magic. It is method. And methods can be learned by watching. Back in the quarters, night brings a different kind of education. Elders speak in low tones about places beyond the river, cities where rules bend differently, ships that carry goods, and sometimes people who never return. Names of states spoken like rumors, half real, half myth. Information travels through people, not paper. The boy begins to understand the importance of listening without appearing to listen, of asking questions that sound like curiosity but function as mapping. Every story becomes a piece of a geography he cannot yet see, but believes exists. He also sees what happens to those who ask too directly. A man sold after speaking too boldly about escape. A woman punished for teaching a child a song that contained directions hidden in metaphor. Consequences are not always immediate, but they are certain enough to shape behavior. So concealment becomes a shared language. A glance that means not here. A pause that means later. A joke that carries a warning inside it. The system believes it has reduced these people to labor units. In reality, it has created a population fluent in subtlety. The boy practices this fluency daily. He learns to lower his eyes without lowering his awareness, to answer quickly without revealing thought, to move through spaces as if he belongs nowhere, because belonging invites scrutiny. Invisibility, again, not disappearance, but controlled presence. He notices something else. Too, the system fears embarrassment more than injustice. When visitors arrive, everything shifts. Clothes mended more carefully. Voices softened, punishments delayed or hidden. The appearance of order matters deeply to those in charge. Reputation is a currency they guard fiercely. The boy files this away. A system that depends on looking moral is vulnerable to being seen clearly. But that is a thought for later. For now, survival requires rhythm, predictability, becoming so reliable that one's inner life goes unexamined. He perfects the art of being underestimated. Adults speak freely around children they believe do not understand. He becomes furniture in their presence, useful, unnoticed. He hears disputes about money, about politics, about laws being debated in faraway halls. Words like abolition float through conversations, usually followed by laughter or irritation. The idea that this system might not be permanent is treated as foolishness, yet the fact that it must be discussed at all suggests otherwise. Change exists first, as rumor. Rumor becomes anxiety. Anxiety becomes stricter enforcement. Stricter enforcement reveals fear. The boy senses the shift before he understands its source. Overseers more watchful, owners more defensive in conversation, preachers more insistent about obedience. When a structure feels threatened, it tightens. Tightening creates pressure. Pressure creates cracks. He continues to grow not just in body, but in awareness of the invisible architecture around him. He begins to see that slavery is not just chains and fields. It is paperwork. It is law. It is churches and banks and dinner conversations. It is people who have never held a whip but benefit from those who do. A web, not a single hand. This realization does not make him despair. It makes him patient. Because webs, for all their complexity, rely on tension. Pull one strand at the right moment, and vibrations travel farther than expected. He does not yet know which strand he will touch, but he knows he must first learn the pattern. So he watches the tides of authority. Who is feared? Who is ignored? Who drinks too much? Who speaks carelessly? Who believes the system so completely they never imagine being questioned? These people are not monsters in their own eyes. That is what allows them to sleep. They see themselves as managers, guardians, participants in an order older than themselves. The boy begins to understand that evil rarely introduces itself as such. It calls itself necessary, practical, traditional. This understanding hardens into something quiet inside him. Not rage, not yet, but clarity. He is not witnessing random cruelty. He is inside a design, and designs, unlike storms, can be studied. The river continues its slow passage nearby, carrying goods to market, news between towns, whispers of a wider world. Boats pass that he is not allowed to board. Sails appear and vanish like reminders that movement exists, even if not for him. But the sight plants something steady in his mind. The world is larger than the boundaries enforced here. That fact alone is dangerous. He says nothing of it. Outwardly, he remains what they expect. Capable, contained, compliant, a success story in the language of slaveholders. Proof that their methods work, that discipline produces order, that erasure is effective. They do not see the accumulation happening beneath the surface. Every contradiction noted, every weakness catalogued, every performance recognized as performance. The world that made him believes it is shaping a tool. It is, instead, sharpening an observer. An observation, given time, becomes understanding. Understanding, in the right conditions, becomes something the system cannot afford to exist. But those conditions have not yet arrived. So the days continue. Work. Watch. Listen. Learn. A childhood transformed not into innocence, lost, but into awareness gained. The system believes it is teaching him his place. It does not realize he is learning its structure. And structures, once understood, are never as unbreakable as they appear. Every system insists it is stable right up until the moment it begins to shake. The plantation does not change all at once. No thunderclap announces the shift. Instead, tension enters like humidity, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. The boy feels it in the pauses between orders. Conversations among the white men grow sharper. though their smiles remain practiced. Newspapers arrive more frequently. Letters are opened with less ceremony and more urgency. Words once spoken casually are now followed by glances over shoulders. Somewhere beyond the river, arguments are turning into positions. Positions into threats. Threats into plans. The people who claim ownership of everything here begin to sound like people who might lose something. The boy notices the overseer drinking earlier in the day, notices the owner traveling more often, returning with a stiffness that is not quite anger and not quite fear. Notices how quickly small acts of resistance are punished, now not because they matter, but because control must be demonstrated. When power feels questioned, it performs itself more loudly. Whippings become more public, rules more detailed, movement more restricted. The system tries to close ranks, unaware that tightening a fist also makes it easier to see what the hand is doing. Rumors drift through the quarters at night, states arguing, politicians shouting, words like union and secession spoken with uncertainty, as if they're spells no one fully understands. The enslaved are not given explanations, but they do not need them. They are experts in reading emotional weather. Something is breaking at the top, and when structures crack above, pressure redistributes below. The boy, no longer quite a child, senses opportunity, not as freedom, but as confusion. Confusion is a kind of cover. Systems in crisis make mistakes. They overlook details. They trust the wrong people. He becomes even more careful. In times of instability, survival favors those who appear steady. He carries messages between properties now, moving along roads where he hears fragments of conversation not meant for him. Poor white farmers angry at wealthy planters, shopkeepers worried about debt, men boasting about war who have never heard a shot fired in anger. Everyone speaks of honor. No one speaks of the human beings whose lives are collateral in these debates. The contradiction is vast and obvious, yet treated as background noise. Men who demand liberty for themselves defend ownership of others in the same breath. They do not hear the dissonance. The boy does. Hypocrisy, he realizes, is not a crack in the system. It is one of its load-bearing walls. The plantation owners begin holding meetings in the big house, maps spread across tables. Voices low but intense. The boy serves water, stokes fires, moves silently through rooms heavy with decisions. He hears numbers discussed, not just of crops and profit, but of men. How many can fight? How many must stay? How many hands can be spared? Hands. Not people. Not fathers, brothers, sons. Units of labor being weighed against units of war. The irony deepens. The same men who fear losing control of their enslaved workers are now considering arming themselves to defend a system built on They speak of tyranny while enforcing it daily. The boy feels no surprise, only confirmation. The system is not built on logic. It is built on belief, so deep it resists evidence. Then come the uniforms. Not many at first. Young white men in ill-fitting coats, practicing drills in open fields. They march with more enthusiasm than skill. They talk about glory the way boys talk about games. The overseer watches them with approval, as if violence, directed elsewhere, is a sign of health. War, like slavery, is discussed as necessity. Both are framed as regrettable but required. The boy notices how quickly the language of defense turns into the language of dominance, how protecting our way of life means preserving a structure that depends on his continued bondage. He says nothing, but he listens more carefully than ever. As men leave to fight, gaps appear. Labor must still be done. Crops do not wait for politics. The enslaved are pushed harder, yet watched by fewer experienced eyes. Younger overseers, less disciplined, more volatile, take positions of authority. Inexperience creates inconsistency. Inconsistency creates openings. Food supplies fluctuate. News travels unevenly. Some days bring whispers of victories. Others, long silences that speak louder than words. The owners pretend confidence, but their routines betray strain. The boy observes a subtle shift in posture among the enslaved. Two, not open defiance. That would be crushed, but a quiet recalibration. Work slowed just enough to go unnoticed. Tools misplaced at convenient times. Information shared more deliberately. Oppression has trained them to survive. Now, survival includes waiting for the right imbalance. The system that prided itself on order is now distracted by events beyond its fields. Its attention is divided. Divided attention weakens control. One evening, the boy overhears an argument in the big house. A visitor from another county speaks bluntly. If the war goes poorly, everything could change. Laws, property, labor. The word emancipation is spoken not as a moral possibility, but as a threat. The room falls quiet after that word. Not because they think it, just not, because they think it possible. Possibility is more dangerous than opposition. Opposition can be crushed. Possibility spreads. The boy feels something shift inside him. Not hope, not yet, but a reordering of the map in his mind. The world beyond the plantation is no longer just rumor. It is a force pressing inward. But instability cuts both ways. Fear makes owners harsher. Suspicion grows. Punishments for perceived disloyalty increase. Patrols along the roads intensify. The system, sensing vulnerability, lashes out to prove strength. Violence becomes less measured, more emotional. The boy understands the risk. Change does not guarantee improvement. Chaos can swallow the powerless first. He does not mistake turmoil for freedom. He continues his discipline of invisibility. Watching, learning, waiting. Then soldiers begin appearing in places they did not before, not local boys in borrowed uniforms, but organized columns moving with purpose. News arrives that battles are being fought closer than anyone expected. Armies crossing rivers once thought to be borders of safety. The war, distant and abstract, is becoming geographic. Owners start moving valuables. Silver packed away. Documents hidden. Some send families further south. The plantation's confidence drains slowly, like water from a cracked barrel. The boy notices that, in moments of crisis, people reveal what they truly value. They secure money before food, papers before people, reputation before mercy. He files this away with everything else. One afternoon, he sees something he has never seen before. A group of enslaved men from a neighboring property being marched away under guard. Not sold, but conscripted to build fortifications. Labor redirected from profit to war. The system is eating itself, using the very bodies it claims as property to defend the structure that denies their humanity. The irony is almost too sharp to hold. At night, whispers change tone. Less speculation, more calculation. If armies come, which direction? If lines shift, who controls the roads? Information becomes currency. Those who travel for errands, like the boy, become nodes in a quiet network of awareness. No one announces leadership. It emerges through usefulness. The boy shares only what he knows to be true. Exaggeration is dangerous. False hope more dangerous still. Credibility, once lost, cannot be regained. He has learned this from watching the masters. They lie constantly about kindness, about necessity. But because they control punishment, their credibility is never questioned openly. The enslaved have no such luxury. Truth must be handled with care. Then comes a day when the horizon looks different. Smoke in the distance, not from fields being cleared, but from something larger. The overseer rides out and returns pale, shouting orders that contradict each other. The owner locks himself in his study with maps and whiskey. Panic, the boy realizes, is the one emotion power cannot disguise. The system built on certainty now runs on rumor. Union forces, a phrase spoken like a curse, are said to be advancing. Some enslaved people from nearby plantations have already fled, seeking protection behind those lines. Others have been caught and punished brutally. The choice between staying and running is no choice at all when both paths carry danger. The boy understands that history is not a wave lifting all boats. It is a storm where survival depends on timing, information, and luck. He waits. Because waiting, when done with awareness, is not passivity. It is preparation. The plantation's routines fray. Work schedules shift unpredictably. Meals are delayed. Overseers argue among themselves. Authority splinters under stress. And in the cracks of that splintering, space appears, not freedom, but movement. The boy feels the world tilting, the old balance failing. The system that defined every moment of his life is no longer confident in its own permanence. For the first time, those in power are reacting instead of directing. The fracture has begun. He does not celebrate. He watches the break widen, knowing that falling structures crush as often as they liberate. But he also knows this: a system that cannot imagine its own end is least prepared for it. And this one, for all its cruelty, has never truly believed it could fail. Power rarely announces itself in forms you expect. Often, it arrives quietly, in gestures that seem routine but carry consequence. The boy, now a young man, has grown into the rhythm of the plantation. He understands the invisible architecture better than most. He has mapped its contradictions, learned its patterns, stored its hypocrisies. And yet, recognition does not come easily. And when it does, it is almost never meant for him. He is sent to the main house one morning with a message for the owner. The halls are cooler than usual. The windows open only slightly to prevent the breeze from carrying sound. The owner sits at his desk, a ledger open, but his attention is elsewhere. He does not acknowledge the young man's presence at first. His eyes are scanning a document that the boy cannot read. Numbers and words merging into an abstract geometry of power. "You've been reliable," the owner says at last. Not as praise, but as observation. Quick. Uncomplaining. Discreet. The young man nods. His posture is careful, his expression neutral. Recognition, he knows, can be a trap. Praise can become expectation. Visibility can be weaponized. The owner continues, unaware of the lesson he is imparting unintentionally. "I'll be honest with you," he says, a phrase that signals confession but delivers obligation. "Things may change, and when they do, I expect efficiency. I expect compliance, not for your sake, mind you, for mine. You understand?" "Yes, sir," the young man replies. Truthful, yet neutral. Compliance, the system believes, ensures safety. Awareness ensures survival. The recognition is hollow. It carries no safety, no reward, no freedom. Yet it illuminates the young man's position more clearly than any lecture could. He is visible now, but only in ways that serve the owner. The system recognizes him not as a person, but as an instrument, precise and useful. In the quarters, his peers notice the change. Some envy the acknowledgement, assuming it grants favor. Others fear it, understanding intuitively that visibility in the wrong direction attracts danger. The young man understands both perspectives, but does not speak. Knowledge of this dynamic is a resource he preserves, invisible to those who believe recognition is praise. He begins observing patterns of opportunity. The owner travels frequently now, leaving intermediaries in charge. The overseers bicker. Small fishes appearing in previously rigid hierarchies when someone higher in the chain hesitates or errs. Consequences ripple unpredictably. Moments like these are dangerous, yes, but they are also instructive. The young man notes how the system compensates, how control is reasserted, and where weakness persists. Outside, the world presses closer. Smoke on the horizon. Reports of battles, escaped enslaved people moving through forests. Sometimes seen, sometimes whispered about in the quarters. Soldiers pass through nearby towns, their uniforms unfamiliar, their presence unnerving the locals. Each event destabilizes the carefully calibrated routine of the plantation, though outward appearances remain deceptively calm. The young man begins to perceive a truth few acknowledge. The system depends on constant distraction, on the careful maintenance of illusion. When attention falters, cracks appear. When belief wavers, control becomes brittle. He experiments subtly, small acts, delaying a task, just long enough to observe reaction, carrying messages slightly differently, listening to conversations that might otherwise be ignored. Every movement is measured. Every gesture carries dual meaning for himself, and for those who do not yet know they are teaching him. One afternoon, the owner summons him again. This time, the young man is brought not for message delivery, but observation. He watches the owner negotiate with another plantation owner. Their conversation a careful dance of numbers, allegiances, and insinuations. The words emancipation and rebellion appear, not as discussion, but as threat. You see the value in loyalty? Do you not? The owner asks, after the other man departs. The young man nods, without comment. He recognizes the tone. Less instruction, more test. Recognition without rescue. Visibility without choice. The acknowledgement is a cage. In the evenings, he reflects on these lessons in silence. The quarters are alive with quiet strategies. A whispered warning about patrols. A story about a hidden path through the woods. A rumor of soldiers moving south. Every fragment is useful. Every detail informs a map he cannot yet fully articulate. The young man understands something crucial. Recognition from power is not kindness. It is surveillance. It is assignment. It is control, framed as acknowledgement. And yet, it is also information. By being noticed, he learns what the system values, what it fears, what it assumes. He begins to adapt, turning recognition into observation. Every interaction, every moment of visibility is a chance to understand the machinery from within. He records these patterns silently in his mind, noting how authority shifts with proximity, how fear manifests subtly, how obedience is measured not by words, but by attention and posture. Meanwhile, the larger world intrudes ever more insistently. Soldiers encamp near the river. News arrives of battles fought, victories celebrated, defeats concealed. The plantation reacts as it can, reinforcing gates, revising schedules, issuing harsher orders. The young man notes the inefficiencies, the contradictions, the points where panic overrides protocol. Each observation is catalogued internally, invisible, to those who believe he exists only as tool. He witnesses something unexpected. A neighboring plantation owner, known for rigid discipline, evacuating valuables and people in haste, leaving behind tools and livestock. Panic, poorly managed, reveals true priorities. The young man records this without comment. Knowledge without immediate action is itself power. At night, he sits quietly, listening to conversations in whispers and murmurs. Stories of soldiers, moving, rumors of escaped enslaved people, complaints about disrupted routines. He observes how information travels, who trusts whom, and how deception becomes a survival mechanism. He begins practicing subtle psychological maneuvers. A question asked innocently elicits truth. A nod, carefully timed, encourages overconfidence in an overseer. Silence provokes confession. Recognition has taught him one thing. Systems are strongest when they believe themselves unobserved. The most powerful figures in his orbit, he realizes, are unaware of the depth of attention paid to them. The owner, the overseers, the visiting landholders, all perform authority, but none measure the observer measuring them. The young man uses this invisibility strategically. Then comes the test of the moment. The owner requests his presence for a task that others believe impossible. A ledger must be carried to a distant office. Orders must be delivered. Directions followed. Questions avoided. The young man executes flawlessly. He is noticed, praised quietly, and then left alone. The recognition is again without rescue. He is visible, useful, and yet bound to the same invisible rules as before. In these moments, he learns the crucial lesson of survival under observation. Attention is a tool. Compliance can be performance. Obedience can be camouflage. And in the spaces between expectation and oversight, strategy emerges. He observes another phenomenon. Fear among those who enforce authority. The overseers, once confident, now second-guess orders. The owner's instructions are followed mechanically, yet hesitation creeps in. The young man notes every lapse, every overcompensation. Every flaw is a crack in the structure. The plantation, for all its order and discipline, is not unbreakable. Outside, the war continues to intrude. News of battles, of victories and losses, shifts the balance of local politics. Neighboring plantations react differently. Some tighten discipline, some falter. Reports of runaway enslaved people circulate. Some are caught, others disappear into forests and towns. The young man records this information mentally. A network of knowledge growing inside him, invisible to those who see him only as servant. He begins to understand that the system's greatest strength, its confidence and permanence, is also its greatest vulnerability. When those in power act as if everything is secure, they fail to anticipate adaptation from below. When obedience is assumed, strategy can emerge quietly. The young man also notes the limitations of knowledge. Every action carries risk. Information is dangerous if acted upon prematurely. Timing is critical. Understanding does not equate to freedom. Recognition from power does not grant it. He witnesses an incident that crystallizes this truth. A neighboring enslaved man, caught trying to deliver news to those beyond the river, is punished severely. The young man observes the aftermath. Fear spreads, obedience is reinforced, and yet the lesson is double-edged. Knowledge, even acquired secretly, can be weaponized, but only with precision. He returns to the quarters that night, silent, cataloging. The whispers around him are now a network of partial truths, fragmentary maps. He notices patterns. Who can be trusted to pass information? Who exaggerates? Who conceals? He practices invisibility even among peers, learning how to extract data without revealing his understanding. Recognition has taught him one final lesson. The system depends on being misunderstood. If the powerful believe they control him entirely, they underestimate what he perceives. If they assume he exists only as labor, they overlook his observations. Visibility then becomes a weapon, not a gift. And yet, the young man remains bound. No step forward is taken without the calculation of risk. Every movement is measured. Every action is deliberate. Compliance is performance. Invisibility is mastery. Recognition is documentation. In the quiet of night, he rehearses the patterns internally. How the owner behaves when confident, how the overseers argue, how fear travels through bodies, how rumor shifts belief. He imagines the pathways of power as rivers, some visible, some hidden. He notes the tributaries where information flows, where gaps exist, where contradictions can be exploited. The plantation is alive with power, and the young man moves within it like a shadow. He is seen, but only in ways that serve others. Yet, within him, observation accumulates. Preparation crystallizes. Recognition has arrived, but without rescue. Visibility exists, but choice does not. And in this state bound, observed, cataloging, the conditions for transformation begin to take shape. He understands that true opportunity is not announced. It is sensed. It is quiet. It waits for fracture, for distraction, for oversight. It waits for a moment when recognition becomes irrelevant, because strategy and knowledge carry the weight of movement itself. He closes the night as he has many nights before, silent, listening, learning. The world outside presses closer, unpredictable, and vast. Inside, the system strains under its own contradictions. Authority is fractured, yet still powerful. Recognition has illuminated position without freeing the occupant. And the young man, unseen in his understanding, prepares for a time when visibility will be his instrument rather than his cage. The lesson is simple, yet profound. The system can notice you, can praise you, can fear you, and still leave you bound. Recognition without rescue is both instruction and warning, and in such instruction, the mind may find a freedom that the body has not yet known. He does not move yet. He waits, observes, catalogs, plans, because he has learned that power is loud and observation is quiet, that contradictions reveal weaknesses, that fracture produces opportunity, and that invisibility, practiced, patient, deliberate, can become a force of its own. The world is shifting, slowly, unpredictably. The system tightens and falters simultaneously. Recognition has arrived, yet freedom remains distant. But inside, strategy grows. Knowledge accumulates. Awareness deepens. And in that quiet accumulation, the young man prepares for a moment that no one has announced when. Observation itself may become action. The world outside the plantation has changed, though not yet for him. Smoke rises on the horizon. Soldiers march. Letters arrive from distant towns describing upheaval. Armies clash where maps once promised certainty. The news trickles down through merchants, travelers, and whispers in the quarters. Each fragment carries both risk and revelation. The young man, now more than adolescent, but still less than fully free, perceives the shift with clarity. What others call chaos, he calls opportunity, not for glory, not for escape yet, but for understanding, for knowledge gathered in the shadow of attention, for preparation invisible to those who assume control. Invisibility, he realizes, is no longer merely a survival tactic. It is a tool, a weapon, a method of transformation, and it must be honed. He spends his days watching carefully, not just the movements of men and women around him, but the rhythms of the system itself. Orders are issued, observed, obeyed, but how they are executed often diverges from intent. He notes these discrepancies, memorizes them, files them silently. A wagon must be loaded. Overseers argue over priority. Workers move according to routine, yet subtle variations emerge depending on who is present, who is absent, who is watching. The young man positions himself to witness all, learning not only what is being done, but how errors are corrected, how silence is punished, how attention shifts under strain. Even small gestures become lessons. A glance exchanged between overseers carries meaning. The placement of a ledger on a desk signals intention. A tone of voice in command, barely audible, conveys panic before words can. The plantation is a classroom, and every motion is a lesson in power, fear, an opportunity. By night, he rehearses mentally. Step is guess. Chassis sequence. Timing. Tone. Rhythm. Observation becomes internalized discipline. He does not speak of it. Words would make it visible. Invisibility is maintained, sharpened, refined. The young man begins experimenting subtly. A task performed with slight imperfection, unnoticed by most, allows him to test reactions. Another task executed with over-precision draws attention deliberately, learning where scrutiny is applied and where it can be avoided. He observes deception in others, the overseer who exaggerates authority to compensate for ignorance, the house servant who feigns obedience to gain minor privileges, the neighbor who misleads visitors to protect family members. Each instance is catalogued. He does not imitate carelessly. He learns the anatomy of pretense. Deception becomes a tool of awareness, not for open defiance. That would be fatal. But for positioning, to be seen as compliant while gathering intelligence, to be noticed as functional while remaining untouchable. Every action, every gesture, every measured pause becomes deliberate. The young man begins to understand timing, when to speak, when to move, when to appear distracted, when to appear indifferent. Invisibility is not absence. It is mastery over perception. He learns to move within the system as if he belongs, yet without surrendering his own attention or comprehension. The system expects noise, complaints, explanations, justifications, defenses. Silence is unusual. Silence commands attention, but it also hides understanding. The young man cultivates it. In conversations with overseers, he nods at appropriate moments, responds minimally, conceals the depth of his knowledge. He lets others speak, revealing their own assumptions, desires, and fears. Even the owner's recognition becomes a kind of mirror. Praises are noted, but their implications are dissected mentally. Instructions are executed flawlessly, but without urgency. Obedience is a performance designed to appear natural while retaining control over what is truly observed. Silence allows him to map more accurately. He begins to identify points of leverage, not physical leverage, not rebellion yet, but psychological, where authority is fragile, where assumptions are false, where panic precedes action. Each observation strengthens his understanding. Each moment of invisibility sharpens his position. He listens to elders in the quarters. They speak in metaphor, in code, in song, lessons hidden in folklore, directions disguised as stories, caution couched in humor, knowledge encoded in rhythm. He records these mentally. He experiments, adapting the lessons to his own understanding. Some elders warn, some deceive, some mislead. All are instructive. He learns the difference between truth for survival and truth for strategy. He begins to anticipate reactions, to predict behavior. Observation becomes prediction. Invisibility becomes foresight. Even the children around him teach indirectly. Their mistakes, their exaggerations, their small rebellions are data. Patterns emerge. Each minor deviation is an opportunity to refine perception, to learn when power is performative, when obedience is hollow, when fear dominates judgment. Preparation in the shadows. With the world unraveling outside, the young man begins subtle preparation. He practices movement, quiet, precise, deliberate. Routes between quarters, through fields, along roads, are memorized with attention to detail. Timing of patrols, variations in overseer routines, gaps in observation. He experiments with concealment, shadows, natural cover, timing with sound and wind, every factor calculated. He learns that being invisible requires both physical skill and psychological understanding. It requires predicting what others expect, and then deliberately diverging from it in ways they cannot detect. He practices mental resilience. Observation without action can breed frustration. He conditions himself to patience, to waiting for the exact moment when knowledge can be turned into leverage. He does not rush, does not dramatize, does not signal intent. Invisibility, he understands, is strength only if it remains unnoticed. Each piece of information he gathers is stored mentally, like a map. Roots, routines, weaknesses, fears, contradictions. He begins to connect fragments, an absent overseer at a critical moment, a servant unaware of a shift in attention, a patrol route, predictable under certain conditions. Patterns emerge. Opportunities appear. He understands that power is loud, but structure is quiet. Orders barked across the field, whippings administered, rules enforced. These are noise. Real authority moves in subtleties, allocation of tasks, unspoken assumptions, reliance on routine, dependence on obedience. Invisibility allows him to perceive the structure itself. He becomes familiar not just with people, but with the system's anatomy, its rhythms, its vulnerabilities, its logic. The world that once confined him now becomes a source of strategy. If observed with patience, he begins experimenting with perception. Subtle gestures, careful expressions, delayed responses, all designed to cultivate overconfidence in overseers, misdirection in authority, and blind spots in observers. He becomes a master of psychological camouflage. Seen, but misinterpreted. Present, but underestimated. Fear, he notes, is contagious. Panic travels faster than orders. Authority assumes stability, even when it falters. Invisibility, carefully applied, allows him to manipulate these assumptions without overt action. A nod here, a hesitation there. Small signals with large consequences in the mental calculus of those in power. He practices restraint. Every impulse is weighed, every emotion contained. Expression is minimized. Movement is deliberate. Speech is calculated. The body becomes a tool of observation and survival, not of attention or assertion. The young man begins small tests, minor deviations from routine, delivering a message slightly out of order, observing reactions, slightly bending an overseer's expectation, noting the result. Each test increases his confidence and sharpens his understanding of how the system responds under uncertainty. When errors are discovered, they are explained away. When mistakes are ignored, they reveal tolerance and assumption. He catalogs both outcomes. Invisibility is not simply hiding, it is understanding and exploiting the assumptions others make about his obedience. At night, he reflects on lessons learned. Observation, patience, and subtle action have transformed him. He has not escaped, but he has cultivated freedom within confinement. The system believes it controls him completely. He knows differently. Transformation is now psychological as much as practical. He does not need weapons or allies to practice invisibility. Knowledge and observation have become tools of leverage. Awareness itself has become armor. He understands that the system depends on assumptions, that those who obey will always obey, that those who observe are limited by what they see, that those invisible are powerless. He has disproven each assumption. Internally, he is aware of threats, of weaknesses, of opportunities. He is invisible and armed with insight. Even routine labor, carrying water, tending fields, delivering messages, is now strategic. Each interaction is an opportunity to test, to observe, to refine understanding. Every task executed flawlessly reinforces invisibility while deepening mastery. The young man practices patience because true action requires the right moment. Preparation is as much mental as it is physical. He trains himself to endure scrutiny without revealing comprehension. He cultivates calm in the presence of fear. He learns that subtlety is a kind of resistance, more powerful than defiance. He experiments with timing. Movement is synchronized with distraction. Speech is measured to reveal only what is necessary. Observation becomes layered, watching the behavior of overseers, noting their reactions to authority, and predicting outcomes. He observes others practicing similar survival techniques, learning the limits and possibilities of subtle manipulation. Even small acts of strategic invisibility, delaying a task, hiding knowledge of a route, feigning distraction, produce meaningful insights. He begins to recognize that invisibility is not passive. It is active. It shapes perception. It creates opportunities for influence without exposure. It is preparation for a moment not yet arrived. By now, the young man's transformation is complete. He is still bound by circumstance, still physically confined, still forced into obedience in appearance, yet he has cultivated a silent power. Knowledge, observation, and invisibility have become tools. He moves unnoticed, but with awareness. He is present in every moment, yet free in understanding. He has turned the lessons of recognition, contradiction, and fracture into mastery. He knows how to appear compliant while gathering intelligence. He knows how to observe without being observed. He knows the rhythms of the system and the vulnerabilities within them. The plantation, the overseers, the owners, all believe they see him fully. In reality, he is unseen, and within that invisibility, he has cultivated strength, foresight, and preparation. Transformation through invisibility is not visible. It does not announce itself. It cannot be measured by chains removed or orders obeyed. It is a quiet accumulation of understanding, a patient sharpening of perception, a deliberate conditioning of self. And when the time arrives, that invisible preparation will allow action in a system unprepared for awareness it cannot measure. For now, he waits, observes, practices, endures. Mastery grows in silence. Strength grows in restraint. Awareness grows in invisibility. The world outside the plantation continues its chaotic shift. Battles rage, rumors spread, and authority falters in ways the powerful cannot anticipate. Within the plantation, he moves unseen, cataloging, calculating, preparing. He is invisible, yet powerful in ways no one can perceive. And in that invisible power lies the possibility of transformation, the possibility of a life unbound, though not yet realized. The system he has inhabited for years, that intricate architecture of obedience, fear, and expectation, is no longer what it was. The air itself carries tension now, faint, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore. Smoke rises in distant fields. Soldiers move through nearby towns. Laws shift faster than the overseer's capacity to enforce them. The plantation's routines, once seamless, now stumble under the weight of uncertainty. The young man, no longer quite a boy, though still not fully free, moves through these fractures with deliberate precision. He is no longer merely observing. He is calculating, anticipating, learning how the system behaves under stress. Every lapse of attention by those in power, every contradiction they reveal, becomes a potential opening. Invisibility, once a tool for survival, has become a weapon. The owners, conditioned to see control as a birthright, fail to notice the slow erosion of their authority. Men who were previously invisible to them, workers, neighbors, enslaved people, begin to exercise subtle influence. Tasks are delayed, routes diverted, orders executed just slightly differently. The owners perceive only the surface. That work continues. That routine is preserved. They do not perceive the subtext, the quiet recalibration of attention, the subtle manipulation of their assumptions. The young man uses this to his advantage. He executes his labor with precision, never drawing undue attention. Yet he directs the flow of information, observes weaknesses in enforcement, and exploits contradictions wherever they appear. Invisibility allows him to operate within the system while remaining unmeasured. He is everywhere, yet nowhere, seen yet not understood. Even the overseers, once confident in their dominion, falter under stress. Some act as others withhold information in fear of accountability. Authority, which depends on confidence, becomes unstable. The young man watches silently. He notices patterns. Who acts under pressure, who hesitates, Every reaction is a lesson, every lapse a blueprint. The world beyond the plantation intrudes relentlessly. Armies advance. News of victories and defeats filters through towns and villages. Escapes occur. Some succeed, others fail. The young man catalogs every event, mentally mapping the shifting geography of control. Knowledge of routes, schedules, loyalties, and weaknesses becomes more valuable than strength. He understands that opportunity is not sudden. It emerges from observation, patience, and understanding of systems in flux. The fractures in authority, the contradictions in obedience, the lapses of surveillance. These are openings. They are invisible to those who believe in their own. OMNISCIENCE. Every encounter, every task, every conversation becomes data. He observes without seeming to observe. He acts without seeming to act. Invisibility becomes a strategy for influence, a way to shape events without exposure. Recognition, which once arrived as praise from the owner, now functions differently. The young man understands its true meaning. Acknowledgement does not equal power. Visibility does not equal freedom. He has been recognized, yet he remains bound. The owner's gaze does not liberate him. It merely illuminates his position in the hierarchy. This lesson becomes essential. He treats recognition not as reward, but as intelligence. Every compliment, every instruction, every acknowledgement is analyzed for hidden meaning, for assumption, for vulnerability. He converts what others consider validation into insight. The system continues to operate as if recognition were sufficient. The young man quietly accumulates knowledge and skill, preparing for moments the system cannot anticipate. By now, invisibility is no longer a passive state. It is mastery. The young man moves with precision, timing his steps to the rhythms of others' attention. He speaks only when necessary, revealing nothing of the breadth of his awareness. His gestures are subtle, his expression neutral, his presence calculated. He experiments with psychological tactics, a delayed nod, a slight hesitation, a misdirected glance. All manipulate perception without exposing intent. He shapes the assumptions of those around him, creating openings without rebellion. Authority acts, but his influence remains invisible. He begins to see the broader mechanics, how fear travels faster than instruction, how assumptions dictate action, how attention is the true currency of control. He does not act recklessly. Every decision is measured, every movement calculated. Invisibility provides leverage, strategy, and power. The war beyond the plantation reshapes the landscape. Soldiers move. Roads become dangerous or impassable. Neighboring plantations falter. Some flee. Some enforce discipline more harshly. The young man observes patterns, gaps in oversight, contradictions in schedules, weaknesses in guards. Every fracture in authority is catalogued. Every lapse of attention becomes a potential pathway. He practices patience. Transformation requires timing. Action without preparation is fatal. Invisibility, carefully maintained, allows him to watch while others scramble. He becomes a silent participant in the collapse and recalibration of the system. Even as the world shifts, he remains cautious. Knowledge alone does not guarantee survival. Observation, calculation, and patience are essential. He understands that freedom, if it arrives, will come through subtle mastery rather than dramatic confrontation. Over months and years, the young man builds an internal map of power and vulnerability, every overseer's weakness, every owner's assumption. Every pattern of labor and observation is noted. He predicts behavior before it occurs. He acts only when consequences are predictable. His invisibility allows him to move within the system as if he belongs, while simultaneously shaping his understanding of it. Authority believes it observes him completely, yet he remains undetected. His power grows silently, without notice. He begins to understand that action is not always physical. Influence, information, and perception are themselves weapons. Subtle shifts in behavior, timing, and attention allow him to manipulate outcomes without exposure. He moves as a shadow within the system, unobserved but effective. The subtle mechanics of escape, when it arrives, will not be sudden. It will be the culmination of years of observation, patient accumulation of knowledge, and precise exploitation of cracks in authority. Every lesson learned from obedience, from recognition, from contradiction, from fracture, converges into an ability to move undetected, to anticipate, and to act without being seen. He knows that freedom is contingent on conditions he cannot fully control. The system can crumble, but collapse can be deadly as well as liberating. Timing is everything. Preparation, invisibility, and understanding must align with opportunity. Every route, every schedule, every habitual assumption is a potential key. He watches, catalogs, and waits. Eventually, the system falters in a way that cannot be ignored. Armies pass through. Laws change. Routines are disrupted. Some enslaved people flee. Some are captured. Some negotiate partial freedoms. The young man acts in ways he is prepared for. Movement through gaps in authority. Precise execution of plans. Avoidance of exposure. He gains a measure of freedom. Not dramatic, not celebrated, but real. Yet recognition remains absent. Histories will overlook him. Records will name others. Newspapers will print the faces of generals, politicians, and reformers. His contribution, though profound, remains invisible. Victory has arrived, but memory has not. Even now, those who once exercised authority over him may not realize the extent of his strategic mastery. To them, the system simply continues, altered only by chance, circumstance, or distant law. They will not perceive the subtle recalibration caused by one person's careful observation and patient invisibility. He moves forward quietly, unrecognized and undercounted. Influence has been exerted without celebration. Authority has been navigated without defiance. Power has been understood, leveraged, and survived. Victory here is not triumphant. It is quiet, survival, mastery, strategic invisibility. These are the achievements. Freedom exists in practice, but history has not yet written the record. The system may continue to operate in new forms. Others may claim credit for changes that he helped shape. Memory, the young man realizes, is selective. Public recognition often favors spectacle over strategy, drama over patience. The lessons learned through careful observation, patient preparation, and disciplined invisibility will rarely appear in narrative. They exist instead in the subtle shifts he has orchestrated, in the survival and understanding he has cultivated. Even those closest to him, peers, family, allies, may never fully perceive the extent of his mastery. Invisibility, once a method of survival, has become a permanent lens through which he engages the world. He is free in body, strategic in mind, and unseen in legacy. The system continues, restructured but resilient. Authority persists, adapted, but incomplete. The young man has acted, survived, and influenced, yet he remains largely unacknowledged. Those who believed themselves powerful may never realize the depth of their underestimation. Historical memory, selective and imprecise, will attribute change to visible figures, generals, politicians, reformers. The quiet mastery of one person, cultivated in invisibility and patience, will be erased from public record. His victory will exist only in the subtle recalibration of a world that never intended to notice him. The lesson is clear. True change does not require spectacle. True survival does not require recognition. Mastery may occur without acknowledgement, and historical memory often forgets the very people whose skill and patience shape the course of events. He stands, finally, at the edge of what is possible. The horizon stretches wide, smoke and light intermingled. Soldiers move, laws shift, communities reorganize. He moves quietly, unseen and undetected, having transformed invisibility into strategy, observation into power, patience into freedom. History will not remember him. The system may never account for his influence. Recognition, delayed or denied, has no bearing on the truth he has lived. And in that quiet, unacknowledged mastery, he leaves a legacy unmarked, a victory without memory, a life shaped not by praise or acknowledgement, but by the patient, deliberate control of what others cannot see. The story ends here, not with resolution, not with triumph, but with the unsettling truth. Some victories are invisible, some heroes are forgotten, and some power operates silently, shaping the world while history looks elsewhere.